So a listener recently got in touch with me and pointed out something fascinating that relates to a couple of our previous episodes, and I kind of want to bring this up now.
Okay. Hit me.
All right. So we're going to tie in. You ready for this? We're going to tie in both our episode on spiritualism,
okay,
as well as our episode on utensils.
Wait, what? Oh, wait, does this have to do with spoons?
It actually has to do with, are you familiar with the Oneida company?
Yes, I think I have Oneida. I think we had Oneida silverware growing up.
And also they make all of that like plastic silverware.
Oh, yes. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, disposable cutlery.
Right. Yes. So, fun facts. You know how Western New York was sort of that hotbed of the spiritualist movement and all of these weird religious groups kind of popping up everywhere in Western New York, right?
Yes.
So,
okay.
In Western New York, there's a town called Oneida. So in Oneida, in 1848, the Oneida community was established, and it was one of these similar types of movements that existed because it was the idea was sort of a utopian type of society. Okay. It was founded by a group of Christian perfectionists, right?
Oh, geez, that sounds like a fabulous combination.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, right, they developed this religious philosophy that informed the whole community to live together as this commune. Okay. And so then in 1880, after more than 30 years of them existing as a commune, the Oneida community voted to transfer all of their common property to a joint stock company, which became known as the Oneida Community Limited. And then the Oneida Community Limited started the production of silver-plated flatware in 1899.
What?
Yes. And then in 1929, the company merged with another company and started producing a lower quality line of silverware. So more for like the common people or whatever. And then in 1935, the Oneida community changed its name just to Oneida Limited. And that's still the company that produces silverware and plastic.
So they started out as a religious community and then ended up in the silverware business.
A religious commune as part of this commune. Like spiritualist movement that was happening in Western New York.
Wait, that is bizarre. What? Why? Why flatware? Why silverware?
I don't know. I don't know why specific flatware, but yeah.
Fascinating. So, I mean, I guess you have to fund your commune some way, but that's crazy. I thought you were going to tell me about spoon bending or something like that.
No.
That's even better. That's even better. Oneida, the spiritual commune turned silverware moguls.
Yes, cutlery.
Yeah, cutlery moguls. Yeah.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Emily.
We're two long-distance best friends with a passion for learning about all the things that make everyday life interesting.
With my PhD in geography
and my master's in library science,
doing deep dives on topics is our idea of a fun time together. We'll share our findings with you on
Researching the Obvious.
I don't know if today's episode ties into any other podcast episodes that we've done in this season or next season, but you never know. I mean, I know we'll probably end up talking about Egypt because everything
I was going to say that.
Relates to that.
That for sure is going to come up today,
and probably Baltimore because we can't help ourselves.
Yeah, but I have a feeling this episode is going to branch off and lead to other episodes. That's what I think. It could go in so many directions.
I think this episode might be one of our more existential episodes. Today, dear listeners, we're going to be talking about time as a concept.
I feel like this might be the epitome of an obvious topic that we would end up researching at 2 a.m. because how many times a day do you pick up your phone and check the time, or look at your computer and check the time, or look up at the clock at the wall and check the time, and never think about why it is the way that it is? Right?
Exactly. And honestly, I'm actually surprised that we haven't done research on this before, because do you remember when we were in college when we had to do the daylight savings time where you fall back an hour in the fall and then spring forward in the spring? The first year we were in college, you were so confused because Indiana didn't do daylight savings time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Indiana didn't start doing daylight savings time until 2006. So that was a new concept to me. I mean, it's like I knew it existed, but I had never had to live in it, right?
Right.
So I knew that there were times when, since we had family in Ohio, right? As a kid, I remember there were certain times when we would go to visit family in Ohio and they would be on the same time as us. And then there were certain times where we'd go to visit family in Ohio and they'd be an hour ahead, behind. I don't remember whichever one it would be.
Yeah, an hour. It would be an hour ahead, right? Because I guess sometimes Indiana would exist on Central Time if you didn't do daylight savings.
Yes. So and it also just always struck me as odd that, like, I don't know, you could just within a couple of hours of driving be in a different time. Like, why is the time changing? I don't know. Yeah. And like, it almost like makes my brain hurt because I'm just like, no, but the time is the time. Like, I can't change like that. And then if you really want to, like, this also kind of drives me nuts. I understand why they do it, but I think Indiana is also one of the few states now that exists in multiple time zones, because the very southern tip and the very northwestern tip are on Central Time because of, because of Chicago. Because the northwestern area of Indiana is so close to Chicago, it makes sense for them to be on the same time as Chicago. And then in the southwestern, I think it's just because they're far enough west that it also makes sense for them to be on Central. Like, they're next to states that are on Central Time. Yeah. So, and I'm like, how can we all live in the same state and have different time? Like, what are these lines? Who's making these decisions? Why? Which I think is a similar response to what I had in college. It was like, why? Why are we doing this? I don't understand.
Oh, yeah. I remember just talking to you about how we had to change the clocks, and you were like, what is happening? Why are we doing this? What is occurring? I don't know. I remember you being so confused about it. And it cracked me up because it just didn't occur to me because I just grew up with it. Yeah,
because for your whole life, right? Yeah. It was a normal part of the year.
Exactly. I know Arizona still doesn't do daylight savings time.
Are they the holdouts?
And Hawaii, I'm pretty sure, also does not do daylight savings time. But Indiana for a while. And I guess I didn't realize when I was growing up that Indiana didn't do it. I knew about Arizona only because my family accidentally drove there once. And it was a different time than we thought it was going to be. And it worked in our favor. We drove to Arizona and we were trying to go to, I don't even remember, Saguaro National Park. We were trying to go there and we were like, oh crap, we're going to get there right when they're going to close. And then we arrived and realized, oh wait, we have a whole nother hour because we didn't know Arizona didn't not do daylight savings. And so they were on Pacific time, but we thought they were going to be on Mountain time. So it worked out.
Yep.
But that's the only reason I knew about Arizona. I didn't know about Indiana.
Well, now we've been doing it for so long. You know, we've been doing it for 20 years now. It's a normal part of my life. I don't freak out. I just begrudgingly change the clocks and kind of get irritated at the whole concept that, like, I'm somehow gaining or losing time that is not a material thing. That seems very arbitrary.
Right? It's so random. It's so random.
Yes.
I mean, occasionally it works out in your favor. I remember one of our friends was in nursing school in college, and if she worked on the spring forward night, she still worked or got paid for an 8-hour shift, but it was technically only 7 hours.
Oh, yeah, because she worked overnights. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So she was working during the change.
Right. So I feel like that, occasionally it works out in your favor like that, but
yeah.
Very weird.
Yep. It was foreign to me. So
I know. So I'm actually surprised we didn't look up any of this stuff before, to be honest.
Yeah. Or did a deeper dive.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, like I said, I think sometimes I avoid the topic because it makes my head hurt a little bit. It's kind of like, I don't understand though. These seem like very arbitrary decisions that were made. Yeah. And then, you told me in the course of discussion about this episode, you told me that China exists in one time zone, and that really hurt my brain. I was like, what do you mean? This really makes no sense to me.
Yes, I will get into that a little more later.
I did not know that, and I just feel like I'm woefully undereducated on the concept of time in our society, because man,
how time exists.
So on that note, we'll keep it as grounded as we can,
right?
No guarantees that there won't be some existential musings along the way.
Exactly. What even is time?
So I guess where we should start with that question too is, like I said, in a cultural context, why do we measure time the way that we do, right? This is something else I hadn't even really thought about, is why are there 60 minutes in an hour and why are there 60 seconds in a minute?
Yeah, why is it like a base 12 system? What are we doing with that?
Right. Because then that's a valid question, because when you think about it, why not, like most of the world uses a base 10.
Mm-hmm. The metric system.
The metric system. Yes.
Yeah.
So like, why not 100 minutes in an hour and, 100 seconds in a minute or something like that.
Right.
Okay. So I looked this up, and as we just said, the most widely used numeral system is base 10, which probably evolved because we have 10 fingers. So it's easy to count. And
sure, that makes sense. Yeah. I feel like because money is base 10 and distance is base 10, that kind of thing.
So some ancient civilizations, though, such as the Babylonians and the Sumerians, used a base 12 system.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
They thought the importance of the number 12 might be related to the number of lunar cycles in a year, because there's 12 lunar cycles in a year, or the number of finger joints on each hand. So similar to excluding the thumb. So again, a method of counting that's easily accessible. In your 4 fingers, there'd be 3 joints in each finger that you could count on. And
it's like how you do the calendars on your knuckles. Yeah. Well, and also I just like, as an aside, going back to the lunar months, when you think about the countries where we have the cradle of civilization, humanity, and that kind of stuff first appearing, so Egypt, Babylonia, Sumeria, India, those countries are pretty close to the equator. And so they don't have seasonality in the same way that other areas of the world do. So for the most part, their days and nights are always pretty equal in terms of time. And then add to that, just in terms of on a yearly basis, they're not having like changing seasons as much. So they're really reliant on the moon in order to calculate the passage of time, because they can't do it in the same way with like having a very distinct winter period with different day lengths.
Yes. Okay. And also on that note, I did read too that it took a while for an actual standard hour to be calculated. The hours would vary in length based on the season, because what they would do is they had sundials, and they would calibrate it to divide the day into 12 equal parts. Those 12 equal parts could be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, depending on the time of year it was. They weren't necessarily counting minutes at that time.
I see.
Yes. But that's a good point too, just about their location. Because I kind of wondered about that. Wouldn't it be really different? But if they were closer to the equator and not experiencing as much variation, that would make a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
All those places are kind of the same latitude.
So as far as nighttime, right? So sundials, we kind of know how those work. They use shadows to calculate where the sun is. And that's how they would divide things up into days. So in the nighttime, they had a set of 36 stars, and the passing of the night could be tracked by the appearance of 18 of those stars. 3 each were assigned to the 2 twilight periods when stars were difficult to see. So there were 3 when the night started and 3 specific ones when the night ended. And then in total darkness, there were 12 stars that they looked for. So that's how they did the division of the night into 12 parts.
Oh, okay. That's how they calculate time at night.
Yes. Yep.
Interesting.
So, and then around, they called it the New Kingdom for ancient Egypt. They have it as 1550 to about 70 BC. They simplified the system to use a set of 24 stars, 12 which marked nighttime. And so then we've got the 24-hour day, I guess. So 12 and 12. And the fixed length hours, they didn't really come about until around 147 BC. There was a Greek guy by the name of Hipparchus proposed dividing the day into 24 equal hours, 12 for daylight and 12 at night. That happened during the equinox. So he was saying, like, let's take the days that are equal and make that our standard. However, that didn't really catch on right away. People were still kind of just basing it on the seasons for a long time. And so hours were various lengths depending on the seasons. And really the fixed length only became commonplace after mechanical clocks came into play in Europe in the 14th century. So even though someone had the idea to standardize it and they kind of said, like, this would make sense, they didn't really do that in practice.
Sure, yeah, because if you live at a more northern or southern latitude where the day length is changing, then until you have a machine able to keep a specific record, there's not really a way to maintain an equal minute.
Yep.
Fascinating.
Yes. We're going on a journey here. We're getting to the minutes and the seconds too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. When I started really digging into this stuff, I mean, it makes sense that it would be this complex because it's not a simple thing to calculate time or to come up with a standard of time. But I never thought about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's just like something you take for granted every day, I guess.
So basically we're saying the base 12 is just because Egypt had systems of calculating time that was in a base 12. And then we just kept that.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. And then on top of that, so this Hipparchus guy and other Greek astronomers, they used a sexagesimal system, which is base 60, that came from the Babylonians, who got it from the Sumerians.
Okay.
And they developed it around 2000 BC. They're not sure why they were using 60, except 60 is a little bit unique in that it's very easily broken into fractions, and it's the smallest number that's divisible by the first 6 counting numbers. So it's divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Oh, base 60 is wild, though.
Yeah, it is.
But okay, yeah.
So it's divisible by 1 through 6, and it's divisible by 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. So it's divisible by a lot of numbers. So again, they don't know why they picked 60, but maybe because it was able to be divided up like that. I don't know. Who sits around and had to think of these things?
I mean, people who didn't really have much else to do, I guess. Like, what else was happening? I guess they were... Cats were domesticating themselves. They were having grain. That was what was going on back in ancient Sumeria. Was cat domestication.
That's right.
And farming, and I guess coming up with number systems.
Yep. Base 60. Yep. And base 60 is still used in geometry. So 360 degrees in a circle, right?
True.
It comes from a base 60 system. And I'm sure I could have gone down a rabbit hole there too with the beginnings of geometry and all that, but I didn't. That
you reined it in
too much. Yes, that would be too much for me. I would probably really start to have a headache. So then incidentally, which I think you'll talk a little bit more about latitude and longitude, but Eratosthenes, my Latin and my Greek, not great.
Oh, Eratosthenes.
Eratosthenes. He also used a sexagesimal system to divide a circle into 60 parts, and that was how he devised an early system of latitude. So again, this is where the base 60 comes in. Then the Hipparchus guy normalized the lines of latitude, making them parallel, and he also added longitudinal lines. And then in 150 AD, Claudius Ptolemy expanded on this and subdivided the 360 degrees of latitude and longitude into smaller segments, dividing each into 60 parts, and then subdividing it again into 60 parts. The first division of parts he called the partes minutia primae, or a minute. And then the subdivision was called the partes minutae secundae, or a second. So that's how we get the minutes and the second.
Okay.
So it definitely wasn't practical or really needed to track minutes or seconds until we had mechanical clocks. Just like you said, it doesn't make sense to really, like, what does that even mean without a way to track it? And that only appeared, like I said, in Europe in the end of the 16th century. But that is why apparently time is base 60, because the Babylonians and the Sumerians did it. And also the ancient Egyptians brought us base 12. And I guess base 12 plays nicely with base 60.
That is true.
Yeah. Crazy.
Okay. Yeah. So basically it was like a combination of Egypt calculating hours of the day in a 12-base system, but then the Greeks calculating the rotation of the Earth in a base 60 system that came from the Sumerians and Babylonians and used the 60 as fascinating.
Right?
Yeah. Because I was just going to say, why is 360 degrees a globe? Why is it 360 degrees? But that is obviously based on why geometry is that way. And we're not going to go there today.
Right. Not today, at least. But it was a base 60 system, basically, that, came from the Babylonians and the Sumerians. And that's what they used.
Fascinating.
The Greeks
Fascinating.
to figure out their latitude and longitude and, like you said, calculate the rotation of the Earth and whatnot. And so then that would become the kind of template for timekeeping as well. And we still use it all these years later. Never needed to change it. Kind of crazy.
Why? Yeah.
I
suppose it works.
It works. Yeah.
So that does get into a little bit of the idea of time zones, because in order to sort of understand why we have the time zones we have, you have to get to the idea of longitude, because you have to understand Earth-Sun relations a little bit. So you have, obviously, the Earth rotates a full 360 degrees every day. And so when we're looking at how the Earth is positioned in relation to the sun, there's always going to be one spot on Earth where the sun is directly overhead, and that's called solar noon. And so when solar noon occurs, that's when you don't have a shadow. So that's like, if you're looking at a sundial to calculate time at noon, there's no shadow. And then any time before or after noon, you're casting a shadow to figure out what time it is. So essentially, if you were able to teleport, let's think about it this way. If you're at solar noon in one location where the sun's directly ahead, if you were able to teleport, let's say, west 15 degrees on the Earth's surface in terms of longitude, then the sun would be an hour away from noon.
Okay. Yes, this makes sense.
You see what I'm saying? Right?
Yes.
Because the Earth is moving, 360 degrees. So if you just go every 15 degrees around the Earth, then you're on a different hour.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the basis of time zones. But it doesn't really tell us where we're starting from.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, like, who gets to draw those,
yes,
because those lines are not precise, that they end up drawing.
Correct. So to get there, it's a much longer process. And it starts with railroads, which is crazy because basically before railroads, there was no official time anywhere. So
which is also so weird to think of, like, what a thing to take for granted. It's like, time's just relative depending on where you are. Like,
correct.
Correct.
Yeah. So, so essentially what people were doing in order to figure out what time it was is they were still just relying on solar noon. But solar noon, like I said, depends on where you are, literally point to point on Earth.
Yeah.
So it was just like whenever the sun was at its highest, that was noon where you were in that location. Prior to railroads, just in North America, there were more than 144 local times
that's so crazy.
On the continent, because it just depended where you were. And based on where cities were, it was like, oh, in that city, that's where we're going to establish where solar noon is. And then that's the time we're going to use for this general area.
Yeah. But then as soon as you exit the city, who knows? Who knows?
You're just basing it on when the sun is highest in the sky, essentially.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
So every town just calculated their time based on solar noon. And again, prior to railroads, because travel was so slow, it didn't really matter all that much because it would take you days to get somewhere that was far enough, right? Because we're 15 degrees of longitude is not close unless you're like at the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
So realistically, it's taking you a really long time to cover that amount of distance. It didn't really much matter that the time zone of Boston was different than the time zone of Denver because it was going to take you like a week to get there.
Right. And when you get there, you just reacclimate to whatever time they say it is.
Exactly. I mean, it'd take you more than a week. Back in the day, in the early 1700s, that's going to take you like months. However, the railroads got invented, and then all of a sudden, travel became a lot faster. In geography, this is kind of fun, I think, because this gets into the weird kind of geography that I studied for a while. But in geography, we call this concept time-space compression. And so the idea is that as technology advances, both our ability to travel and also our ability to communicate with people, it makes it easier to get from one place to another or to communicate with one place to another. And so the mental concept of distance sort of shrinks in our mind. So it's this idea that as technology advances and we have better communication and transport, then places don't seem as far away as they used to. So the railroads really accelerated that time-space compression because now instead of taking a week to get somewhere, you could do it in a day. And that's a huge change in our mindset of covering a distance. So what that did is the railroads were trying to coordinate all these schedules of travel, but they were using the clocks based on the train station that they left.
Yeah.
And so since we had over 144 different local times, all these train stations were using whatever the local time was, which of course led to people missing trains. It led to trains, converging with other trains because they weren't on the same time. And it just messed up all sorts of travel. So railroad managers tried to create a standardized schedule by creating 100 different railroad time zones. Oof. I don't know how 100 was better. But so they basically just like said what the time was at each railroad station, essentially.
Yeah, okay.
But obviously that didn't really
That's a lot to keep track of. Could you imagine what did they do? Like charts or something? Like,
it was just like a huge like timetable of all the time zones at each
oh my gosh
railroad station. But obviously that was still a problem. So then in 1883, the major railroad companies got together and were like, we have to fix this. And so they're the ones that created standardized time zones. So they pioneered this idea that all of the cities in between this longitude and this longitude are going to be on this time zone. All the cities between this longitude and this longitude are going to be on this time zone. And then a year later, in 1884, representatives from all around the world met at this thing called the International Meridian Conference in order to try to figure out, okay, we're going to have standardized time zones based roughly on this 15 degree of longitude thing, but where do we start it? And so that conference in 1884 was to determine where the starting point of the time zones was. At the time in the UK, most people had been using the Greenwich Meridian line.
I've heard of that.
Yep. To calculate their solar noon. And because the UK was still such a major world power and had all sorts of, colonies and overseas territories and stuff at that time, other countries had also been already using the Greenwich Meridian line. And so basically at this conference, everyone just decided, okay, let's just use the Greenwich Meridian line as the 0 point for time zones, which you may have seen on a time zone map or something like this, where it says plus or minus certain number GTM.
Yes.
So the GTM is just Greenwich Mean Time. So it's whether you're plus or minus off of the Greenwich Mean
Interesting.
Time. Yep.
Okay, I have to remember that one. It's a good little trivia bit.
Exactly. So basically in 1884, the world in general just decided, all right, this longitude line is going to be solar noon. When it's solar noon here, that's 0.0. And then every 15 degrees essentially off of that is going to be plus or minus an hour. Obviously, how each country decides which time zone they're in is dependent on the country. So there's usually some sort of economic reason for picking a certain time zone or over another time zone, maybe a political reason. But how can you just
pick which one you want to be in? Like you're just moving the line?
Yeah.
Because if they're every 15 degrees, like that then gets rid of the every 15 degrees.
Yeah, the rough idea is it would make sense to be every 15 degrees because then you'd be closely tied to solar noon somewhere. But you can go one way or another. For example,
for practicality reasons.
Yeah. For example, today the US has basically we have 5 time zones.
Do we? I don't know anything about time zones.
Because we've got Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, Alaskan, and then Hawaii.
Oh, I didn't know Alaska was on its own time zone. I knew about the first 4.
So we've got 5 different ones, but some countries choose to be different. So, okay, let's look at this really quick. I think this is interesting.
Give me some.
The country with the most number of time zones is Russia, which I think shouldn't be too surprising.
It's big.
Yeah. They have 11 time zones.
Okay.
So
that's a lot. That's twice as many as us.
Yes. But Russia also expands over 170 degrees in longitude. Okay. And the US, we have, if we're just looking at the lower 48, we have 4 time zones and it's expanding over 60 degrees in longitude.
Okay.
So Russia's almost 3 times as big of us in terms of longitude. So that makes sense that they have 11 time zones. But China is a fascinating example because they are about the same as the US. They also expand about 60 degrees of longitude, but they have decided politically that it makes more sense to only be in one time zone.
Okay. This is so mind-bending to me. So what time zone are they a part of? What do they align with?
Beijing.
Okay, so they just want everyone to be on the same time as Beijing.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yes. So if you are living in Tibet, then you're basically living in California, but you're on New York time.
Right. So your days are real weird. 5 o'clock in the morning to you is very different.
Really dark. Yeah. It's a lot of just political, economic factors of why you would choose time zones. The US went through a really interesting pathway, which is a lot more recent than I realized. So the 5 time zones in the US were not officially established in law until 1918, when the Interstate Commerce Commission made them official. So even though we had these like railroad ones and stuff in the 1880s, it wasn't a US law official time zones until 1918.
So it was just the railroads following that, not necessarily the government. And everyone was probably going by the railroads because that was like an easy
So it wasn't like a mandated
point.
like law, essentially.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting. Okay.
And they made that through what's called the Standard Time Act of 1918. And then that also started the process of daylight savings time. That act also established daylight savings time in the US. And I feel like there's a lot of discussion right now about daylight savings time because Congress just passed the bill to have daylight savings time as year-round time instead of switching the clocks.
Which let's pause for a minute too and think about what that means, because this also bothers me, right? Because it's like, let's just make daylight saving time permanent. That just means we're changing the time.
Yes.
Like we're just going to change the time. We're deciding we're on a different time and we're not going to change it based on the time of year. It's like, no, we'll just say what it is. We're actively choosing to change the time that we live in.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is also just makes me like, it's weird. The whole thing weirds me out. I'd be fine with it, to be honest. I'm sick of changing clocks. I don't like changing clocks. I don't like the whole shift. I don't like how my body has to reacclimate, and mentally I have to know that it's a different time than it was yesterday. So anyway, that's just my side note.
No, that's fair. So what's interesting is I didn't realize there was such a back and forth history of daylight savings time in the US. So Congress officially establishes daylight savings time in 1918. When they did that, that meant that we were always on daylight savings time. We weren't switching clocks back and forth. We were just always observing daylight savings time. Okay. And the reason they did this, I know a lot of people are going to think that they know why they did this, because I think there's a lot of misinformation about why we do daylight savings time, right? I feel like I hear stuff about farmers and I hear stuff about schools and for reasons why I do that. So the reason why we do it is to conserve fuel. And yes, the first country who adopted daylight savings time was Germany in 1916. And it was in order to conserve fuel. At that time, Germany believed that if they shifted to permanent daylight savings time, they would save, at the time, $23.8 million a year in fuel costs. That comes out to about $731 million in today's dollars.
Wow. Okay, when we're talking about fuel, are we talking about gas?
We're talking
oil.
Well, we're talking about anything that was powering electric lights and stuff to account for the fact that to account for the fact that they didn't have sunlight.
Gotcha.
So that's why they started adopting it in 1916. And then other European countries also started doing it again because of the fuel argument. And so then in 1918, the US was like, sure, we'll do that too. But then in 1919, daylight savings was repealed. So it lasted a year. Then it was reestablished during World War II from 1942 to 1945, again, because of this idea that it would conserve fuel. So during World War II, during wartime, we were on what they essentially call wartime, just permanent daylight savings, because they were conserving fuel. And so then when the war ended, the country was like, okay, we're not at war anymore. We don't have to be on wartime. So they ended it again. So then in 1966, there was a push by the Department of Transportation, again, because of needs in order to coordinate transportation and stuff, to reestablish daylight savings. And so the Uniform Time Act of 1966 established national dates for changing the clocks to daylight savings. And that's when we started doing this like twice a year, moving the clock for daylight savings.
So was the rationale still to save on electricity?
As far as I can tell, it's weirdly difficult to figure this out. I don't know why, but I've tried to find multiple sources for this and it's weirdly challenging.
Unclear, huh? unclear.
Yeah. But what I can tell is that it has to do with fuel savings, it has to do with transportation coordination and making things standardized.
So a bunch of people got together in a room and just decided this is what we're going to do, and now we do it.
Yep.
I mean, this is what freaks me out about this whole thing. Yeah. I never have quite grasped how time is so controlled by government.
Yeah.
And politics and you know, like,
yeah. And that's not even the end of it, because then during the energy crisis in the 70s, Congress tried to have permanent daylight savings time again. So in 1974, they tried to move to a permanent daylight savings time, and that also only lasted a year, and then it got repealed again.
Interesting.
So we have this recent Sunshine Act that just went through the House and got passed.
Yeah.
But people are kind of like, I don't know if it's going to work, even though we want it to, because we've tried it before multiple times.
Yeah, I did not realize that.
And also in 2022, a separate bill went through the Senate to approve permanent daylight savings time, and that passed in the Senate but then failed in the House. So it's like all these bills have consistently gone through to be on permanent daylight savings time, but then they've worked for a couple years and then gone back.
What doesn't work about it? Just make up your mind what time it is. I can't with this. Stop messing with my brain.
I think the arguments, from what I can tell, the arguments against it are that it creates too much darkness in the morning, which then affects people's morning commutes in a bad way, because at least in the 70s, there were some instances where school children got into some car crashes.
Okay.
But I'm kind of like, okay, does school for children need to start at 7 a.m.?
Yeah, good question.
Right? Work doesn't start at 7 a.m. for everyone. Why is school starting at 7 a.m.?
Probably because parents have to get their kids to school before they go to work. That would be my guess. But it's an interesting thing to just base an entire time decision off of, though, right?
I don't know. I also just feel like, okay, the 70s were a very different time. Today, we have a lot more people that work from home, and
safety in vehicles is also a lot better.
Right?
Also, were there not increased car accidents or issues with the commute home being in the total dark? I don't know. That just seems like a weak argument to me, but okay.
Yeah. I agree. They've also done studies where crime has decreased during daylight savings time because it's lighter later.
Oh, okay. So
like that's a positive for having daylight savings, is that you have decreased crime. Also, we know how much shifting clocks affects our bodies, so it's not a good.
That's what I'm tired of.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just think it's so random that we kept going back and forth.
Yeah, if it's going to be so flexible, then why am I on a schedule at all? You know? Just make up your minds.
Exactly. But anyway, so today, the time zone boundaries, since they've been established by law, they can only be changed by the Secretary of Transportation upon a determination that the proposed adjustment serves the convenience of commerce, because capitalism, I guess. So if a state, I guess when Indiana decided to officially change its boundaries, they had to submit a proposal to the national government, and probably they argued that Gary was aligned with Chicago, so it made sense. My whole thing is that I feel like Indiana the whole state should have just gone on
why not? They have these other arbitrary boundaries that now are drawn where you're in the same state, but you just step over this imaginary line and it's a different time now.
Yeah. And I feel it was just some sort of power move by Indianapolis or something, wanting to stay with the East Coast. But
I don't
realistically, if you look at the longitude lines, Indiana should be in Central Time. I don't know. It's all just political of who wants to be with what. And my guess is that Indianapolis was like, we're going to be on Eastern so that we can be connected to New York or something.
Yeah. It's weird though, because why not? I mean, I feel like Chicago
it makes
is a
more
bigger
sense.
Our Chicago is a bigger influence on us.
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know. This is why I said the whole topic just really gets me going because I think it's so arbitrary and it's so like, why? But that's fascinating. That's really interesting. And like you said, way more recent than what I thought too.
It's really only been since post World War II-ish.
And we've gone back and forth on it.
Right. I know. And it has nothing to do with farmers. Nothing to do with farmers.
Yes, nothing. If it did, then Indiana would have been on daylight savings time a long time ago.
Right.
For real. Well, I'll be, waiting anxiously to see if they stop messing with our clocks and just freaking make a decision.
Yeah. Our time zone is just a different time zone.
Where does that hour go?
Well, we're just no longer basing it on Greenwich. We're basing it on UTC now, which is like universal.
But we're losing
time.
it. We're losing the time.
I mean, so if you want to get real existential, the country of Kiribati actually switched from being on one side of the international date line to the other, and they literally
lost a whole day.
Yeah, December 30th, they just removed it from their calendar the year that they switched.
That's so crazy.
So that day didn't exist there.
What if you were born on that day? I guess no one was born on December 30th in that country.
Yeah, that date does not exist in that country on that year.
That's so weird. So weird. Interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we should talk about, after all of this discussion over what areas are what times.
What time it is.
Yes, what time it is, and how do we even know what time it is? Mm-hmm. How do we know specifically what time it is? Mm-hmm. You would look at your phone, or, before phones, it would have been a clock. Mm-hmm. And then what about before clocks? So then I went down this path. Okay. Timekeeping, the art of timekeeping. Oh. And it is an art, apparently, because there are lots of different ways that were tried over the years. So we talked a little bit about sundials. So that's probably one of the more primitive ways that uses shadows. And then obelisks would be another common one that probably most people have heard of, like monuments. So Stonehenge, how they say they might have used Stonehenge to watch the shadows of those tall fixtures to track time of the year and things like that, and figure out when the summer and winter solstices were. Yeah. Another form of timekeeping in ancient China was incense clocks. I particularly liked this one because I thought this was fun. They used to watch how long it took for an incense to burn, and then they would, when it was done burning, put another incense in, and that's how they would kind of keep track of time. And they had different scents for different times during the day. So if you were to walk into a room with an incense clock, you might even be able to tell generally what time it is from the smell. By the smell of the room. You could smell time. How do you like that?
Crazy.
Right?
Like, I want to have a nice energizing smell in the morning, like citrus or something, and then at night have like a lavender.
And just think your nose knows what time it is.
Okay.
Without even looking.
That's
Isn't
amazing.
that cool? I know. I love that. I love that.
Let's bring that back.
Similarly, candles were sometimes used as clocks too. So the amount of time it took for a candle to burn down. Obviously, these are not highly accurate ways to track time, right? There's some subjectiveness to it because, different candles might burn at slightly different rates and incense and whatnot. But using what's available to them, right?
But again, we don't need precise time necessarily back then.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so this is more just a FYI, right? Because you're probably going more by the amount of light outside than anything. Water clocks. So this one's cool. The earliest example of a water clock was found in an Egyptian tomb around 1500 BC, but there are some written references to water clocks even back from ancient Mesopotamia. So very, very old. And there are some records of China using water clocks as well. They think maybe coming from Mesopotamia, but it's unclear. So the water clocks basically were taking two pots and water dripped from one container to the other. So think about hourglass kind of, but with water. The disadvantage there is that, as the water would drip down, then the water pressure on top would lessen, and then the water's dripping at a different rate. So that was the issue, which is why they then kind of innovated on that, using a constant water source. So like flowing water, or water that would be scooped and then with a wheel, like scooped and dumped into the pot, so that it was one set amount of water that was being used to calculate the time. And then in 976, the astronomer Zhang Sijun in China actually replaced the water with liquid mercury, because water also froze during the winter.
Yeah.
So that would be the first example of a mercury clock.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought about mercury to measure time, since usually I think about it with thermometers, but...
So then the astrolabe comes along, which this thing is nuts too.
Astrolabes are amazing.
And you know what they look like? They look like the golden compass. If you've seen the golden compass, like it looks like, I'm pretty sure the golden compass is based off generally like the visual of an astrolabe. So this is a device that has gears in it and is used during the Islamic Golden Age between the 8th and 13th centuries. It was able to accurately track time, and it measured the height of celestial bodies above the horizon. So that helped them also to track lunar cycles, create tide charts, and it made them exceptionally good at navigating the seafaring activity. So it's really impressive. And then it was also very critical for them in determining the direction of Mecca for their prayers. So it actually had a religious purpose as well, so that they could make sure that they were facing Mecca for their prayer times.
Fun fact. That's why the first sort of age of discovery sailors were the Portuguese and then the Spanish, is because the Iberian Peninsula, where Spain and Portugal were, was part of the Arabic Empire at that time. So during the 8th to 13th centuries is when they would have been part of the Arabic Empire. So the astrolabe was very much used by the Portuguese to start becoming super cool navigators.
Fascinating. I will not go into detail about how it works, because I started to go down that rabbit hole and then I was like, no, I will not. I barely understand it myself. So highly suggest, if you're, of an engineering mind or of that persuasion, to look it up, because it is a really cool advanced device for the time period too. And it looks like it's straight out of the Golden Compass, just saying. So
yeah, it's cool.
Then we have hourglasses. So those actually were not used until about 1338. That was like the first recorded evidence of them. I mean, I suppose they could be used before that, but they were known for having some difficulties because the sand inside, if it got wet at all, it would then clump up. So you had to have a container that was completely moisture proof and that would keep the sand contained. And also hourglasses are made with glass, right? So you have to have the art of glass blowing in order to create an hourglass. So they were more used in Europe, in those areas that had more glass blowing activities.
That makes sense. I guess I just thought hourglasses would have been earlier, but that makes sense.
I thought so too. They seem like such an ancient way to track time or something. But you had to have glass and you had to have it moisture proof. They were, however, used very commonly at sea, because other clocks of that time were more weight driven, and you wouldn't want to use those on a ship because the weight and the tilting of the ship would throw it all off. So hourglasses were important at sea, and also used in churches and cooking, which I thought that would be a good way to use an hourglass, as well as board games now. So
yes, exactly.
that's where the hourglass really shines.
Board games,
when you're playing board games, yes, that are timed. And you want to really pressure someone. Okay, so mechanical clocks. So hourglasses came about after mechanical clocks. In 1275, we have the invention of the verge and folio escapement. So this was a clock that had a verge, or a vertical shaft, that is forced to rotate by a weight-driven wheel. And the wheel has like a sawtooth design. And it's stopped by rotating freely by the folio, which swings back and forth and allows the wheel to only go one notch at a time. So that's where you get like the ticking, right? Like tick, tick, like it would one notch at a time. And again, I'm not going to try to explain it any better than that. I would highly recommend Googling if you want a visual of this contraption, because I had to kind of look at how that works. But this would have been the first attempt at mechanically keeping track of time.
Okay.
And also, again, not the most accurate. It had to be pretty, precise, because you have this weight that you're dependent on. And
that makes me think of like a cuckoo clock, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit. That kind of first attempt at mechanical clocks definitely, I think, carried forward into the later inventions. It's just the most rudimentary of the mechanical clock. Because then in the 15th century, there were a couple of inventions that helped with accuracy, including the mainspring, which was also used for flintlocks in guns. And that actually lent itself to smaller clocks being built, because these other Verge and Folio, they were like much larger, I guess. And then the Stackfried is also invented in the 15th century, and it's a spring-loaded mechanism that evens out the force of the mainspring and basically improve the accuracy at which that notched wheel is progressing. To make it even between there. Yeah. Then also the Fusee was invented during this time, and that's a cone-shaped pulley attached to the mainspring, was also used in crossbows. So that's apparently why it was invented, but then they used it in clocks, and that helped to equalize the uneven pull of the mainspring. I say all of that again, I would Google this for a visual, because it's very difficult to explain in words and actually understand what's going on here. Also, I realize that clocks are a whole other rabbit hole I could probably go down in all the different ways that
clocks are crazy.
They are very, very complex. The fact that somebody just thought of how to put these things together just like blows me away. But again, I'm not of an engineering mind, so that's probably why. So then the next step after this would be pendulum clocks. So like you mentioned, a cuckoo clock. Cuckoo clock has a pendulum. Right? That swings back and forth.
Yeah.
So a pendulum depends on harmonic motion, and harmonic motion in physics is, let me just read you the official definition, and then I'll just explain it a little bit better. I did read this a few times. So harmonic motion is a periodic motion that an object experiences by means of a restoring force that is directly proportional to the distance of the object from an equilibrium position and acts towards the equilibrium position, and results in an oscillation that is indefinite if not affected by friction. So picture a pendulum just hanging straight. That's your point of equilibrium. When you pull the pendulum back and release it, that creates a harmonic motion, because the restoring force, or the force that it comes back with, is equal to, it's equal, and it comes back towards the point of equilibrium and then goes past that point in an equal. Like, that's kind of how I'm picturing it.
No, I'm thinking that because like when you wind a pendulum clock, you have to start the pendulum.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you have to like, you wind it up and then you start the pendulum moving. And then once that's started, it just goes.
Yes, correct. And so that's how pendulum clocks kept time. The original pendulum clocks, this was kind of crazy to think about, had pendulums that were required to swing about 100 degrees in distance. Then there was an anchor mechanism that was invented, and it shortened that to roughly 6 degrees. And that 6 degrees is what got the closest to a true harmonic motion that was equal.
Interesting. Okay.
And so then that pendulum acts on the other gears and mechanisms in the clock to keep the time.
So, okay. So that's probably why like old clocks are really big, because they had to be able to swing the pendulum
really far.
Degree. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. And then the electric clock comes about in roughly 1840 and is made by a Scottish clockmaker, Alexander Bain. And basically, he just had the idea to use electricity through a battery to sustain the motion of the pendulum clock. Because like you said, you'd have to wind it and then start the pendulum. The electricity fed the pendulum the whole time and kept it going. And made sure that it was consistent, right? It's not slowing down, or if it encounters friction or whatever.
When was that made?
1840.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, 1840. By using, again, a battery. to fuel the pendulum.
Do you think it was a Duracell, or do you think it was an Energizer?
It was an Energizer. That's a good question. I only trust Energizer to keep my time. Just
to keep my pendulum going.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so this is fascinating too. This is like where my mind really got blown because I did not realize that this is how this works. So have you ever heard of a quartz clock? Or you might have seen a watch that has quartz,
a piece of
on
quartz
it or whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know where you're going with this, and I'm so excited.
It's like, okay, so quartz clocks were developed in the 1920s, and they use an electronic oscillator that's regulated by a quartz crystal because the crystal creates resonant mechanical vibrations and a signal that has a very precise frequency. So the quartz crystal literally is putting off a frequency that allows us to keep that oscillator going at a very specific interval of time.
Yes, which is why when people talk about like using different crystals and rocks for
energy
things, they all are giving off different frequencies.
Yeah, it's not crazy.
No,
it's not just new age. Like, that's science there.
Correct. Yeah, like you can use different crystals to give off specific frequencies, and that has real application. For example, watches that all have a piece of quartz in them if you have a quartz crystal watch. Yeah.
I mean, that literally sounds like magic. It's like magic to me.
Yeah. It's crazy.
She's like, what? Really? And also, who figured this stuff out? I'm impressed. But yeah, and then I started to go down the rabbit hole of like properties of quartz and why quartz is the one that works the best and all that. And I was like, no, okay, can't go there, but maybe another episode, right? Maybe we talk about crystals and woo-woo stuff another time. I think that would be
right.
Especially quartz, because quartz apparently is very unique and it keeps time for us. It keeps time. So
crazy. And it's just from the earth.
Yep. Yeah, your life is being driven by a woo-woo crystal.
By a quartz. Yeah. By a piece of quartz.
Yeah. Quartz crystal. Yeah. I've also heard people reference atomic time and had no concept really of what that meant. So that came about in the 1960s. So what happened there is, and first of all, the atomic clock is the most accurate timekeeping device currently. It's accurate to within a few seconds over thousands of years. So within thousands of years, it's only going to maybe deviate by a couple of seconds. The National Institute of Standards and Technology changed its time standard from quartz to atomic in the 1960s, and atomic clocks use a transition of a cesium atom, and this was discovered by an English physicist, Louis Essen, in 1955. And what is this transition in this atom? It has to do with like the electron spin and something that happens in the atom that they are measuring. So in 1967, a single second is defined as 9,192,631,770 cycles of the transition between two electron spin energy levels of the cesium atom. The cesium atom specifically.
What? Okay.
So the best that my little brain can understand is that we have now identified in an atom something that happens in this atom, this transition, that is so reliably consistent that we can measure a second off of it.
That's wild.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
I've never given it this much thought, but I'm just like, this is crazy.
Yeah. Did you have an atomic clock in your house when you were growing up?
I definitely remember my grandpa having one. And I remember seeing on it that it was atomic time. And I was like, what does that even mean?
And what's crazy is they adjust themselves. So if, during daylight savings or whatever, all of a sudden the clock's like tick, 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 and it like adjusts itself to the new time because it's based on like a radio frequency wave that gets sent out from the core atomic clock that is using the atoms or whatever.
So Right. Yes. And I'm glad you brought this up because now we're up to atomic time. So when you pick up your phone, your little mini computer that we all carry around now, how do you know that the time on your phone is the accurate time? Now, obviously, if you're online and you're connected to cell phone towers, that's one thing because you're getting the time from a specific place. But where? So, according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the U.S. Naval Observatory staff in Washington, D.C. and Colorado Springs operate an ensemble of around 100 atomic clocks.
Wait.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just picturing a room of 100 clocks.
I know.
Okay.
Then they send that data from those clocks to the International Bureau of Weights and Measures in France. And around 90 other countries also send in data. Then that bureau produces a weighted average of all the data to create the time scale known as Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC.
Yeah.
Yep. And then they tell every contributing clock lab how far off its clocks are from UTC. So they go and they average it, and then they're like, oh, you guys are a little bit off, so let's tighten it up here.
Whoa. Time out. That is like...
Yeah.
So UTC is essentially the average time of all centers of atomic time clocks.
Yes, there's about 90 countries that sent in data, and they average it out, and then they send it back, and they say, this is the time that we're all going by. And then the United States timekeepers then adjust their time scale, their UTC, the Universal Time Scale, which is displayed on the master clock in Washington, D.C.,
like at the Naval Observatory.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes, correct. Okay. And then there are 31 GPS satellites operated by the U.S. Space Force. There are less accurate atomic clocks on satellites. Then the universal time from the United States Naval Observatory is sent from Schriever Space Force Base in Colorado to the GPS satellites to correct their onboard clocks. And then cell phone towers receive time signals from the GPS satellites. And your cell phone and your smartwatch receive time signals from cell towers and correct their internal clock. That's how you know your cell phone has the most up-to-date, most accurate time there is.
Like, right? I'm aware of triangulation. That's very much the basis of geography these days. But I did not realize that UTC is like an average of all atomic clocks in 90 countries. Yeah. Like, that's wild, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that occurred to me is like, whose job is this? I had no idea this is a field you could go into.
Right? Someone's just working in a room of 100 clocks, sending clock signals to France.
Sending data. Yep. Sending data to France. And then France is averaging it out and then sending it back. And then we're sending it up to our satellites. And then the satellites send it to your phone.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, what happens, you might ask, if you're not connected to the cell towers, or you're in airplane mode, or you're off the network?
Sure.
Well, phones have a small battery-powered quartz timekeeper.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that means that your phone has the woo-woo juju.
Yes, that's right.
Got it.
And so that will keep it, keep the time going or keep tracking time, even if it's not connected. And then, if it were to be offline for like a long time and then you came back online, it might have to adjust or something to fit the new atomic time or whatever the atomic time is at that moment. But generally, it's going to keep tracking time using a quartz timekeeper that's battery powered.
So basically, the most accurate ways, to sum up, the most accurate ways we have to calculate time based on a system that was created in ancient Babylonia is through a quartz rock or the movement of an atom.
Yes, a cesium atom, a very specific atom. Yes.
Okay. I mean, I feel like we're going to have to end this episode here because otherwise I'm going to go into like a place of philosophical meandering. I don't understand.
Me too. I know.
What's happening.
I know.
This is blowing my mind.
It's going to keep me up tonight, I think. Like, I'm going to be falling asleep being like, why am I going to sleep at this specific time? And I wonder what rotation the cesium atom is on.
This is wild. Listeners, please leave us a comment about things that you learned in this episode that blew your mind, because I feel like I'm gonna have to unpack this some more, this whole episode.
Right? Or I mean, tell me that you've known this all along and it doesn't blow your mind. I mean, I'd be even more impressed, because I just feel like I'm like, wow, like I'm blown away by this. But maybe that's just me. I don't know.
Maybe this is old news to some people. I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Researching the Obvious. To learn more fun facts about everything that we're researching, follow us on Instagram at Researching the Obvious Pod, all one word. You can also follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you know someone that you think would enjoy listening to all of our findings, please feel free to share or give us a review. Researching the Obvious is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Emily Fekete and Katie Nakanishi. Tune in next time to hear more obvious facts.